Welcome to a Textron Aviation demonstration on the Collins Aerospace ProLine Fusion Avionics suite found on the King Air aircraft. I'm Alex Hunt from Technical Marketing. I'm joined by Jared Jacobs from Flight Ops. We'll take a closer look at the avionics capabilities of the King Air. We'll start out on the ground and then we'll go fly.
All right, let's take a look. Welcome to the flight deck of the King Air 360, where we can take a closer look at the Collins ProLine Fusion flight displays. We can see here the three 14-inch LCD full touchscreen displays that are part of the Fusion. The Fusion comes standard with two true FMSs, which use ground-based and satellite-based information to give the most robust location information possible. Additionally, the Fusion comes standard with two air data computers, two attitude heading reference systems, two nav and comm radios with ADF standard. And anyone that's familiar with the Fusion and the ProLine suite of avionics in general will know that this is the professional industry standard for an avionics suite. So we'll get things started now and take a look at the avionics with it on. Okay, to get started, we're going to take a look at the battery switch. The battery switch has three positions in the 360. So we have off, ground ops position, and then on. So we'll go to ground ops, which is the middle position. And by doing this, what we're going to see is basically a dispatch mode, which is going to fire up a COM1 radio, as well as a FMS for us to input a flight plan. So in the ground ops mode, we can see that we have a comm radio available, so we can listen to the airport weather, we can call a clearance delivery channel, receive our IFR clearance, and then we can come across to our FMS and build a flight plan. This flight plan will stay in the system through a power cycle, so if we wanted to do this before we loaded passengers, this will just save time later once we've put passengers on board the aircraft and started the engines. Okay, so we've looked at ground ops. Now we're going to go to the battery on position, which will allow us to take a look at the full avionics suite. When talking about the Fusion, I like to start with it at its most basic, which would be a full screen pilot PFD, a full screen MFD, and a full screen co-pilot PFD. When we look at the PFD, what we're going to see is that it's set up in your standard electronic flight display setup with an airspeed tape with selectable speed bugs, a nice large attitude indicator with pitch and roll indications, as well as an inclinometer. We have an altitude tape with altitude pre-select, vertical speed pointer, and then a vertical speed digital readout. As we come down, we're going to see the CDI here, which is customizable with some additional information that we'll talk about later, but heading information and general arc view of the CDI. When we look at the MFD, on the left-hand side, there will always be our EIS, or engine indicating system. Here we can see our torque displayed in percentage, ITT, propeller RPM with a synchro phaser, some other engine indications. New to the 360 is the digitized cabin altitude, rate, and delta P, as well as the flap indication, which has been removed from the old triple gauge. So those are now located in the engine indicating system. Below the engine indicating system, we'll see the CAS, or the crew alerting system, which has our red master warning and yellow master caution messages. In the Fusion, the added feature that I really like is that master cautions and master warnings have associated oral tones. So if we have a master caution, we'll hear a single chime over the speaker or headset. We'll see a reverse video flashing master caution light here with the associated condition. If we need to expand the CAS, there's a way to do that. And bring it back in. On the bottom of the MFD, we have two blue fields, which are our scratch pads. The scratch pad will capture any item that is input with the keyboard down here. So if I input a location like KICT for our airport here in Wichita, that will then be found in the scratch pad. It will also capture any numbers, basically any input made by the keyboard. More on the scratch pad later. Continuing on with the MFD, we can see this is a full screen representation of our map right now. So a nice big map. At the very top, we'll notice some of the architecture of the Fusion with a green heading and a green active for the orientation and flight plan respectively. So anything that is highlighted green tells us the active mode that we're in, and then the other items are blue, which are just kind of available for us to select. So if I switch from heading to north up, we can now see that the north up orientation is in green. And likewise, if I change from the active flight plan to the secondary flight plan, the setting follows along with it. Some other items up here that we can look at. We have the window, which toggles on the navigation window, which would house some further in-depth waypoint and distance information of our flight plan, including VNAV. We can also toggle on and off overlays, such as topographical and relative terrain, terrain off, or weather radar information. If the aircraft is equipped with Sirius XM weather, there would be further weather selections available in this pane. Under the Symbols tab, we can see all of the available map symbols which can be added to our map. I simply touch to add any items that I wish. As we can see, they will then populate on the map. And anything that I'd like to remove, I simply can unselect by touching. Here we'll take a look at the cursor. So when I touch on the touchscreen, what we'll notice is that these 4 bars pop up. So these 4 bars are the pilot cursor. So 4 bars for the pilot in the left seat. This cursor can be used on the MFD as we see here, or on the pilot's PFD, and will follow wherever the pilot touches. Similarly, on the right PFD, we'll notice that there are 3 bars on this cursor. So this is the co-pilot's cursor. The co-pilot's cursor can be on the right PFD, or if we'd like, we can touch this icon in the corner and bring the co-pilot's cursor to the center, so the co-pilot can make modifications on the MFD as well. Now that we've seen the full screen MFD, we'll take a look at the functionality of the Fusion and how we can really set this up to suit the pilot's need or the phase of flight. So if I bring my pilot cursor over, and then I'm going to use this home button, which brings up my format selection page. And at the top here, we can see a few different orientations that we can select. You can see it goes all the way up to 4 times split, but the one we're going to talk about right now is the half screen split. Once I've selected that, we can see that I have a map and an FMS here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to grab the chart and I'll drag it over to the right side of the screen. To exit out of the format selection, I can simply touch outside of the box. Next, we'll take a look at some of the items on the pedestal. Here we can see the cursor controller panel, named because it has a joystick which controls the cursor. So as you can see, when I move the joystick, my cursor on the screen will follow along. In this way, I can use touch to move the cursor, or I can use the cursor controller. Along with that, I can also use the knobs of the cursor controller to quickly move between items. And then if I desire, I can also change items using the top knob on the cursor controller. Also on the CCP, we'll see some other items which will simplify using buttons as opposed to touch. So we can switch between our comms. We can make adjustments to the comm radios. We can toggle on and off our traffic view. We can open a menu. We can move between the PFD or the MFD with our cursor, and we can quickly exit any panes that we're no longer using. Between the left and right cursor controllers, we see the multifunction keypad, or MKP. This houses the keyboard, which we can input data for our scratch pad. It also has our number pad, where we can enter either comm radio frequencies or things of that nature. We also have the pan zoom knob, which is really useful when using the map. So if we take a look at the map, when I rotate the knob, I can zoom in and out, getting more detail. And if I move the knob left or right, I can then use it as a joystick to pan around to see areas outside of the current view. To tune nav radio frequencies, I find the easiest way to do this is with a nice feature called the Quick Tune feature. So using my MKP, I can input a comm radio frequency in my scratch pad. So I'll do 123.45, which shows up in the scratch pad. When I hit the Quick Tune button on the MKP, we'll see that they're COM 1 and pre-select, as well as COM 2 and pre-select, populate down here. So the system is smart and knows that those can only be COM frequencies. So if I want to tune to the active frequency of COM 1, I'll simply select that, and we'll notice that it has tuned in the active for the COM 1 radio. Another nice feature from the MKP are the hard keys, which are our shortcut keys, which will always allow us to quickly access a feature of the Fusion that we'd like to pull up. So for instance, when I press the FMS tab, the FMS will position itself on the left side of the MFD. Anytime I press one of the buttons on the MKP, it will make its way to the left portion of the MFD. And if it's possible for it to be a full screen, such as we see the map here, if I press the button a second time, it will then populate the full MFD. When I press the System button, we'll notice that it pops up in a third of a screen here. This is another representation of our engine instruments. So this could be broken out and brought over to a MFD if we'd like, but by pressing it on the MKP, we see it in this quarter screen split. There's also some drop downs here where I can see the system summary, which has additional cabin pressurization information, which is new for the 360's digital pressurization system. And then we also have a display setup screen where I can make some selections for the Fusion standard setup. Also found on the MKP is the memory button. And I really like the memory button when the screens may get a little cluttered, or I've gone down in a very deep into a system and now I want to get back to a more simple setup. So by pressing the memory key, I then bring up the memory recall, which has a lot of different selections for phases of flight, as well as a couple of user memories. So what we can do here is, if I say select the takeoff selection, I've now reset the system to a what the factory default is for a takeoff setting. This can be programmed in maintenance mode for your specific desires, but there are also these two user selectable memories. So for instance, user 7 we have set up to get us back to that full screen setup, and user 8 we'll use as a, say, a 2 crew setup with a full screen map as well as 2 FMSs on either PFD. Now we've already talked about the quick tune function, but there is a tune hard key that's available that we can select, which will bring up a quarter screen split of the comm radios, HF if installed, nav radios, and transponder traffic. So if I wanted to manually change the radio frequencies, I could do that on this screen here. I can also control squelch and some other more in-depth features. This is also where I can come to my transponder and traffic page, where I can see one of the places I can see my transponder code. I could ident here. I can swap between transponders, and I can also see the source of the transponder data. In here we'll also see our traffic test, which is going to test the TCAS2 function, which is standard on the 360. And I can also mention that the 360 comes standard with ADSB out features. The Fusion also has a great feature for our maintenance personnel. If we touch our home to bring up the format selection, go to a half screen split, and then bring our maintenance icon over, leave that window. We can now see the maintenance screen on this half screen display. Here we'll see all of the databases for the system, as well as the licenses for it. And then we can leave the basic mode and enter the advanced mode. This is where we have some pretty high-tech system tracking, which will record any trends, it'll record faults or errors that have popped up, and it will log them and make it available for a download. So if we're flying, we have a nuisance message that keeps popping up, we can download a report onto a thumb drive and then email that drive to our maintenance personnel for them to be able to diagnose what they may think the issue is. Another nice feature is using the thumb drive port, we can update the Fusion very simply through a single port to update all three screens. Now we're going to take a look at the FMS and flight planning in the Fusion. So when I touch the FMS button to bring it up, we'll see that it starts out on the flight plan page of the active flight plan. So again, we're seeing the same architecture where the green is the active mode and blue is just kind of all the standbys. For anyone familiar with the ProLine legacy, like the ProLine 21, you'll notice some similarities here in the flight planning portion, although some features have been made automatic. So formally we would have to go to our setup and find the, we'd verify our location as well as our databases. In the Fusion, this is now automated and any errors would be enunciated to us. So we can simply start out on the plan page. So now I'm on the plan, flight plan, and I can start building a flight. So what we'll do is we'll start here in Wichita. And when I'm flight planning, I have the option of using touch, as we see here, or using the MKP and cursor controller, which I will show you as a kind of a way to keep your hand in one spot down on the center pedestal. So as we follow along here, I can use the cursor controller to click between different fields. So I'll input my cruise altitude in this field. I can type in 30,000 feet like this and paste, or I could type a F300 for flight level 300, which will do the same thing. Our destination today will be Wichita, so we're coming right back in. And you notice as I input information, the cursor hops to the next available field, which is really nice and keeps things moving along. So for our alternate, we'll put Hutchison. Paste. Now I'm going to hop over to my departure field, and what I really like here is that I don't have to navigate away from my flight plan page to load a departure procedure or departure runway. So if I enter this field, we see the departures field pop up. We won't be flying a departure procedure today, but instead I'll just load a departure runway. So we'll say 19 right for now. And then I'm going to come up and start entering information into the 2 waypoints. So for anyone familiar with the ProLine 21, we can see the left side is still like L1, L2, L3, where we have our 2 information, and on the right side of the screen we'll be inputting via information or airways. So our first fix will be Varner. And then I've filed an airway off of Varner, so there are multiple ways of doing this. As with a lot of things in the Fusion, I could touch my airway tab to bring up all the available airways. So in this case, I would use Victor 350, and an exit point will populate here. So we'll go for the Liberal VOR, and then exit that. I could also simply type that information in there if I would prefer that. After Liberal, we're going to go to Garden City, Hutchison, We can see here that multiples are available for the Hotel Uniform Tango VOR, so we just confirm the location. Obviously the one here in the United States is the one that we want to select. And then finishing back at Wichita. Now if I'd like to load an arrival to the runway, I could come down and select arrivals and choose an approach if I desired. Any stars or other arrival procedures would be available in this tab as well. Now that I'm done with my flight plan, I can then navigate from the flight plan page over to the weight and fuel page. Here we'll see that the basic operating weight is already loaded. I can preload any cargo that may be on board. I can add passengers, so we'll say that we have 4 passengers today at an average weight of 200 pounds. And our fuel on board, we have full tanks. And then it'll populate a takeoff weight for us. Once we're done with our planning, what we'll notice is we have some green bars around the flight plan page up here, and if we haven't executed the data, we notice that it changes to yellow. Reason being is I've input some data that hasn't been accepted yet, so I have plenty of indications that there's a step left to perform. So here I'm going to hit execute to make the selections final. Now I can use the large map and take a look at the flight plan that we've built to make sure there are no errors. Here I'm dragging to take a look. This is currently in the heading up. Now I'm going to take a look at a north up representation to make sure that everything is as I expected and it looks good. So I'm going to use the quick key to bring up our chart pane, and as we can see here, the chart will show up on the left half of the MFD. So we can go through and take a look at all of our chart data as you would expect. I can drag to find other information. I can zoom using the pan zoom knob or my cursor controller, and then again pan for more information. I can also access the menu here, find other charts that I might like to see, say an approach chart for one of the runways here in Wichita, and view it. I can switch between the origin, destination, or alternate airports. I can also come into the task, and this is where I could dim for, say, a night operation. And then another kind of interesting feature that the Fusion offers is that I have the ability to split the chart, and so it will keep the plain view of the chart viewable, and then give other I can select another part of the chart that I'd like to see in detail along with that. So here you can see the briefing tab, here's the vertical profile tab, and here's the minimums tab. So I can leave the plain view up and select other items to be shown along with it. So I have just really the information that I see that I would like to have based on the phase of flight.